This is CBN NewsWatch.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm George Thomas. We begin this half hour in the Middle East. Israel says it has targeted a number of senior Hamas terrorists embedded in a humanitarian area who were directly involved in the planning of October 7th. This, as experts say, an expanded war against Hezbollah is imminent. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has that story from Jerusalem.
Israel says it targeted and killed a number of significant Hamas terrorists who were operating from a command and control center embedded in a humanitarian area in Khan Yunis. According to the IDF, the terrorists had carried out attacks against IDF troops from the control center and were directly involved in the execution of the October 7th massacre. Hamas says at least 40 people were killed in the strike on the tent encampment, but Israel disputes those numbers and says it took numerous steps to limit the risk of harming civilians. Attorney Yifas Sigal from the Israel Defense and Security Forum tells CBN News that terrorists have one aim.
You have a death cult of jihadist terrorists who literally wake up in the morning every day and try to figure out a way to bypass your defense mechanisms and to find a way to finally destroy you and kill and rape and destroy the state of Israel and all its people. And we've been saying it for years, but we sounded crazy. But we saw it on October 7th.
Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant reiterated Israel's goals of destroying Hamas and bringing the hostages home and the possibility of war with Hezbollah in the north.
We're looking at all the fronts, and this means that while you're fighting here in Gaza, we're preparing for everything that could happen in the north.
Hezbollah continues to attack northern Israel daily from Lebanon, launching 30 missiles on Sunday alone. Netanyahu is promising to end that threat, and his war cabinet met this weekend to discuss a possible ground invasion into Lebanon. And former war cabinet member Benny Gantz says without a hostage deal, Israel should go to war with Hezbollah. While some 60,000 Israelis are displaced from their border homes, another 200,000 are within striking range of Hezbollah. Sarit Zahavi of the Alma Center says Israel is already in a war with Hezbollah since October 8th, but says Israel needs to hit Hezbollah harder in Lebanon.
Same war of attrition in the past 11 months. The only difference is that we see more shooting to areas that are not evacuated, like where I live. There was a hit of a drone in a building of 13 floors.
The drone struck in the middle of the day, damaging the building but causing no injuries. Meanwhile, Turkey's president accuses Israel of wanting to take over the Middle East and is calling for a coalition of all Islamic states.
They are already declaring that they will not be satisfied with occupying Gaza alone. That is why we say that Hamas is resisting on behalf of all Muslims. This is why we say that Hamas is defending not only Gaza, but also the lands of Islam and Turkey.
But Zahavi says the world needs to understand who is really behind the war and what it's about.
I want to see everybody understand that it is not about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's not about a two-state solution. It's not about Gaza or Palestinians. There is a campaign that was launched by Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, against the Western representative in the Middle East, which is the State of Israel.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Julie, thank you so much. Meanwhile, Israeli forces launched their largest operation in the West Bank in over 2 decades, targeting terrorist threats in multiple Samarian cities. Correspondent Jack Holton reports on the ongoing security challenges in this very much contested region.
I'm standing on Mount Gerizim, which is situated in Samaria, what much of the world calls the West Bank. This city below me was once the biblical city of Shechem. Now it's known as Nablus. This region right over here is the Balata refugee camp. It is very well known and notorious as the birthplace of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade and other terrorist organizations, and that's why this region is a huge hotbed for terrorist activity, especially these days.
The reason why we haven't seen all-out war between forces in Judea and Samaria and Israel is because Israel has been going in with significant intelligence and hyper-focusing military activities on specific terror groups, small groups, as they arise.
As a main thing, we have to understand it's not our war. It's a common war. Because terror from here can raise all over the world.
For Israelis in Judea and Samaria, the threat of terrorism is a daily reality. Many feel they could be targeted at any moment.
There are a lot of the Arabs/Palestinians living in our region, and we've been living kind of side by side, and sometimes they mind their own business, and many times they try and kill us. Ever since October 7th, it's gotten worse.
This town I'm driving through is an Arab Muslim town in Samaria called Hawara, and it's been the site of a lot of unrest since October 7th. As a matter of fact, you can still see the remnants of burned tires in the street and things like that. And it's gotten to the point where it's so dangerous for Israelis to drive through here because their cars have a different color license plate than the cars from the Palestinian Authority, that they've started to take a longer route to go around and bypass this town when they have to come through this area.
United States of America must stand strong with the people in Israel in this operation by attack the terror and not waiting for the terror to attack us. We have to clean this terror. Everyone that wants to live and stay here in peaceful, welcome.
Israeli authorities are particularly concerned about UNRWA schools potentially fostering extremism here. There's growing evidence these UN-run institutions have educated and recruited young Palestinians to join in terrorist activities.
I never seen school books in different states that educate how you prepare and build a bomb. We must solve that. You cannot educate to kill us and think that we will let you live here beside us. It's too much risky.
As tensions continue to simmer in the West Bank, Israelis are taking extra precautions to protect their families.
There's a lot more security. There are more security cameras. We've been purchasing drones, thermal drones, and they've really been a lot of help. More guns, more guns in every community, and hoping and praying. I spend my time praying.
From Samaria, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Thanks, Chuck. Back here at home, millions of Americans will tune in tonight when Kamala Harris and Donald Trump square off for their first and perhaps final debate. The matchup pits a businessman and a former reality star against a career prosecutor. As John Jessup explains, with the two standing side by side, voters will weigh their competing visions for the future to determine who's fit for office.
With only 6 feet between them, Americans will get to size up the candidates when they meet for the first time and share the stage in Philadelphia's National Constitution Center. Ahead of the debate, both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump exuding confidence.
How are you feeling?
Are you ready, Madam Vice President?
Ready.
You know, if I destroy her in the debate, they'll say, Trump suffered a humiliating defeat tonight, no matter what.
Tonight's matchup, originally scheduled to be the second debate between Trump and President Joe Biden, before the president dropped out of the race and endorsed his VP. The two campaigns finally settling on the rules for their 90-minute showdown, which include no opening statements or pre-written notes, 2 minutes for questions, rebuttals, and closing statements, and 1 minute for follow-ups, 2 commercial breaks with no live audience. The two taking very different tacks for preparation. Harris hunkering down for intense mock rehearsals, while Trump holding informal policy sessions, both trying to find ways to define and perhaps get under each other's skin.
This might be the biggest showdown that Philadelphia's had since the Rocky movies. The stakes are high with both candidates in a tight race.
Polls show a close contest, with former President Trump slightly ahead of Vice President Harris among likely voters, 48 to 47%. But that's within the New York Times Siena College poll's margin of error, meaning the race is essentially tied. Many voters will be tuning in to hear what the candidates have to say.
I am looking forward to tonight's debate. I think it'll be like a good square-off between the two candidates.
I'm very looking forward to it. It's the most unusual election preseason that I've ever seen.
CBN contributor Nathan Gonzalez believes the main audience is independent voters, particularly in swing states.
I don't expect something to happen that will, sway Democrats to come away from Harris or Republicans to come away from Trump. I think we're locked in on a core group of people in the middle in 7 key states.
Although Harris enjoyed momentum since taking the top of the ticket 7 weeks ago, Trump could have an edge in the Electoral College, with respected election analyst Nate Silver giving him a nearly 64% chance of winning there, where the race for the White House will ultimately be decided. John Jessup, CBN News, Washington.
James Earl Jones died Monday at his home in New York. Jones overcame racial prejudice and a severe stutter to become a pioneer on stage and on the big screen. He is known as the voice of Darth Vader, the Lion King, and even the taglines for CNN. He also narrated the Bible, saying it was his greatest honor. James Earl Jones's cause of death is currently unknown. He was 93. Folks, we'll be back right after this. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. A gender ideology cult. That's how one author describes the industry that convinces troubled children that changing their gender will solve their problems. She also documents the enormous regret of those who took irreversible steps to alter their agenda. Many of them are warning others not to make the same mistake. CBN's Wendy Griffith reports.
20-year-old Chloe Cole, a self-described former trans kid, is leading the fight to protect children from transgender surgeries. Chloe detransitioned following years of taking puberty blockers and an irreversible double mastectomy at the age of 15.
We need to stop telling 12-year-olds that they were born wrong, that they are right to reject their own bodies and feel uncomfortable with their own skin. We need to stop telling children that puberty is an option, that they can choose what kind of puberty they will go through. My childhood was ruined, along with thousands of detransitioners that I know through our networks. This needs to stop.
So I spoke with a lot of these young people who tried to do the unthinkable to change their gender.
In her new book, Detrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult, Mary Margaret Olahan writes, many of these young people wanted to find themselves and had no idea of the impact transitioning would have on them.
They were told that the reason that they didn't feel comfortable at school, the reason they didn't have a lot of friends, the reason that they didn't feel special is because they weren't in the right body, and that if they got into this right body, that all of their problems would disappear and they would feel happy and content and fulfilled. And of course, this is a lie.
She contends that what proponents label gender-affirming care is really puberty and hormone blockers, followed by, in many cases, gender-mutilating surgeries in which there is no going back.
A lot of these girls got double mastectomies, which is called top surgery, before they were legal adults. In fact, I've heard of girls who are so mentally ill, as all of these young detransitioners are. They were so mentally ill that when they went in for their double mastectomies, they asked the doctors, how long will it take for them to grow back? Because there's no understanding of what's actually going on here. There's no proper explanations from the doctors about what the ramifications of these procedures are. And so, a lot of these girls go into this thinking that they're going to emerge looking just like a boy with a, perfectly flat chest. But at the end of the day, what they're left with is very gruesome looking scars that lace across their chest that are black. So, these are just very invasive and tragic surgeries.
Mary Margaret, detransitioning is starting to get more attention as more people are telling their stories. Is there a common denominator among the young people who are detransitioning?
I would say yes. And there comes a point where they think, okay, I've done what I was told to do. The doctor said I would be better and be happier after this. And then there's a moment where they realize, wait, I'm not happier. I'm not better. I still have very serious mental health issues. And for a lot of the detransitioners, that's the point where they wake up and realize, if I was lied to about this, what else was I lied to about?
Olahan says although parents share responsibility, they are often faced with a frightening ultimatum by doctors who ask,
would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son? And they look the parents in the eyes and they say this, and the parents love their kids. They do not want their child to hurt themselves. And so they trust the doctors and they move forward. And so this is truly a really incredible betrayal by the medical system.
And while these kids are celebrated when they transition, Olahan says those who then try to reverse it can face attacks or rejection.
If a detransitioner speaks up and says, I went through those puberty blockers, I went through the hormones, I got the surgery, and I'm not better. In fact, I'm much worse, and I'm missing body parts, that completely contradicts the narrative that these trans activists are selling, that transitioning is beautiful and brave and wonderful and will only make you happier. And so when detransitioners speak up, they're met with a lot of hate, a lot of vitriol, a lot of bitterness and anger, and they're told that you were never actually transgender and that you're a traitor, all kinds of horrible things. And let's not forget that the detransitioners themselves used to feel very lonely, very awkward. They desperately wanted to fit in. So this is incredibly hard for them when the group that accepted them and told them they were special and brave for being transgender is now saying, get away from us, you're scum.
As for Chloe, her testimony before Congress, along with many others, has helped change the way states look at gender-affirming care. Today, half of all U.S. states ban puberty blockers and surgeries for young people under 18, and more states are expected to follow. Chloe says she and thousands of others have been the victims of one of the biggest medical scams in American history.
I speak to you in the hope that you will have the courage to bring the scandal to an end and ensure that other vulnerable teenagers, children, and young adults don't go through what I went through. Enough children have already been victimized by this barbaric pseudoscience. Please let me be your final warning.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
Still ahead, see how one author is helping to tackle America's mental health crisis. Stay with us. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. America is facing a mental health crisis. One common but often overlooked problem is burnout. On this week's Healthy Living show, pastor and Regent University psychology professor Dr. Jonathan Hoover discusses in his new book, Stress Fracture, Your Ultimate Guide to Beating Burnout. Here's a clip.
A lot of people think it's slang, but it's actually recognized by the World Health Organization as an actual disease. What made you get so interested in burnout, and what prompted you to write this book?
You mentioned I serve as a pastor. My dad has been the pastor of the same church here in Wichita for just under 40 years, and I joined the staff back in 2010. And the church had experienced explosive growth, and everything was going so wonderfully. And my dad had been this really respected and looked up to leader, and it just seemed like everything he touched was working. And then in 2010, out of the blue, he hit this wall, and it was just an emotional and physical crisis that he experienced, and it shocked us all. All of us were like, what in the world is going on? This is the guy who's always the adult in the room. This is the guy that we always look up to ask the questions. And suddenly he was dying. He was struggling with questions about, his spiritual connection to God. And he was having all kinds of worrisome physical symptoms. And the challenge was nobody could tell us what it was he was going through. Nobody was able to give us good counsel about how to help him. Fortunately, God brought him through that, and he was able to recover. But in those days, as I was sort of just trying to keep the wheels on, I was a newly minted 29-year-old pastor preaching in my dad's place. Our church was about 4,000 on the weekend at that time. So it was like trial by fire, going right into the middle of that. But I kind of promised myself, when we get through all of this, I'm going to figure out what this was. I had just started studying psychology. And as I finished, my graduate work, all through that time, I was thinking, I've got to figure out what happened to my dad, and I want to learn more about it. The interesting thing is, the more I studied it, the more I found out that this has happened to so many people, leaders especially, who just go through this season where they hit the wall. And, in the old days, they used to call it a nervous breakdown. I think you can have burnout and not quite be at the point of a nervous breakdown, but that's really what it was for my dad. And that really inspired me. And so that caused me to do tons and tons of academic research. I started researching burnout academically. And that's what I continue to do to this day at Regent and with other professors across the world, actually. But one of the things that I always wanted to do was write the book that I wish we could have given my dad in 2010 that we just couldn't find. We couldn't find a resource that had the right answers. And and if you open the front flap, you'll see we dedicated it to my dad, because it is the book that I wish we could have given him back then, and the book that I hope will be beneficial to those who are dealing with burnout. It's such a painful thing. And we wanted there to be a really well-researched, if you look back at the references section, there's a ton there, a really well-researched resource on how to deal with burnout and how to prevent it, hopefully.
And I'm glad that you brought out the fact that a lot of leaders are the ones who suffer burnout, because these are good people. These are people who try so hard and are working so hard. And these are the people that suffer from burnout. And it doesn't have to necessarily be your job that you drive to or go to. A lot of people, their job is at home, being a full-time stay-at-home mom or a caregiver. If you have a parent, God forbid, who has Alzheimer's or is just, just declining physically, and you're taking care, any type of a caregiver also is very much at risk of burnout. So you've got these people who are working so hard, and it's very tragic. And it does seem like more people are burned out these days too. How do you know if you're burned out? Like, what are the symptoms of burnout?
Well, I think there are symptoms physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Physically, you're going to probably have some pain that you can't explain, muscle pain especially. So you're going to have, it's very common with people who are going through burnout to have neck pain, shoulder pain, back pain. It's very common to have digestive issues, indigestion.
A recent campus gathering organized by New Life Young Adults drew nearly 1,500 students. Two pastors posted pictures of the gathering on Facebook, saying they were powerful testimonies and 62 baptisms. The Christian Post reported the message was about the conviction, cleansing, and commissioning that follows a genuine encounter with God. Folks, that is it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com, or you can talk to us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, which is formerly known as Twitter. We hope you'll join us again next time, folks. Have a great day, and God bless you.